my name is Pam McNerney. I'm your event host for tonight. So after the event, you're welcome to buy books here or on the other side, and then we're going to have a signing. And we ask you that you please purchase the books before you have them signed. So I'd like to welcome Erin McHugh, the author of Pickleball Is Life, the complete guide to feeding your obsession. So show of hands, how many people are obsessed? Okay.
More on that in a minute.
Oh, we have a few holdouts here too. So all right, we'll have So Erin is the author of 30 books of humor, inspiration, trivia, children's history, and LGBTQ topics. A former publishing industry executive, McHugh has worked for various publishers and was executive vice president and creative partner at Franklin Spear, the publishing advertising agency. She has also enjoyed a second career as a bookseller in New York City and as a book buyer in her hometown at a luxury home store. Erin is, among many other things, a devoted pickleballer. So welcome, Erin McHugh.
Thank you, Pam. I have never I've been in the industry, publishing industry, one place or another for 45 years. And this is the first time I've done an event at RJ Julia, and it'll be the second time I've been here. So I'm hoping it's just my debut. And I couldn't tell you how thrilled I am to be here. So thank you for having me so very much. I have a question, and that is what Penn brought up. Everybody stand up who plays pickleball. Keep standing if you play twice a week. Keep standing if you play 3 times a week. 4 times. 5 times. I'm setting up a game later. 6 times. Every day. Oh wait, who is 6? All right, we all work. All right, play together. Beautiful. Swag for you guys. Thank you. I'd like to, as you can see, so I came out in my pickleball outfit, and I think people sit in the audience and think she could not wear a nice outfit. But my fear is always that I'd be here and you'd be signing, we'd be, signing books afterwards, and you say, it's too bad you have on the Sydney heels, because I have a lighted cord over at my house, and you could come right over there with me with the other 2 or 3 people, and then what? I'd be sunk. So I've always prepared. I've always got in my trunk a net, chalk, tape measure, extra ball, whatever you need, right? So that's a nut. I play every day. I prefer it if I can play twice a day. Now and again, I will play 3 times a day, but then the visiting nurse has to come over and pry me off the couch to make a little pasta at the end of the day. But I'll do it. Anyway, I've been playing about 5 years and almost, and last, I guess about 1.5 years ago, I broke my hand. I don't say it in the book, but let's face it, I fell when it was during the book. But so I, as a writer, I already had an agent. So they put a cast on it. After about 4 days, I thought, what the hell, what? So I texted her and I said, she plays people. I'd have to get a new agent. And I said, listen, I'm gonna be in this cast for 10 weeks. I think I should write a book about pickleball. Like maybe 90 seconds later, I get a 1-word answer from her. Duh. And so off I went and did this proposal, and I can tell you, and anybody else who writes and knows, you work for months and months on a proposal, you send it out, it never gets sold, and you're depressed and say it'll never work, happen again, and then in about 3 weeks you get another stupid idea. But so this sold overnight, and it was extremely exciting because we were trying to beat, this is now September of 2021. So now we know this is coming big, and so I started the proposal. Then about it like this. Here's the proposal. Like this. 4 fingers over here, 1 finger over here. So it took a minute. But then another 3 or 4 days went by and I thought, what, and I went out and learned to play with my other hand, with my right hand. Because I couldn't, yeah, of course, you have to change up your friends a lot. You can't ask the same people to play every day. You gotta find new suckers who will take you on playing with your other hand, but it was a really interesting brain experience. And it was exhausting. I gotta tell you, I played for an hour only. And I'd get home and, because you don't realize as you're playing how much your brain is doing for you. You get a great shot and you think, gee, I didn't even mean to send that ball over there, but you know what, your brain did. So you have to think about everything. And it was something else. Anyway, I'm gonna read something from the book. And when I started the book, I realized that I knew somebody vaguely and had heard that she was, in fact, she was, late 60s, so my age. She was the daughter of one of the 3 founders who invented, one of the dads who invented, but good for, good 3 dads, good for Father's Day weekend, who invented pickleball. So I called her and I said, Allison, would you mind speaking to me? And she said, no, I'd love to, and I'd love to hand you over after that to Frank Pritchard. So he was the son of one of the other kids, one of the other guys. So, this was something nobody else had. To be able to talk to them was really something else. And I can't tell you what wonderful stewards these families are. And by the way, none of them make a dime from pickleball. Not one even thin dime. They seem to have a couple of bucks, but okay. They're not making any pickleball money. And they are so gracious and they are so out of their minds happy at what has happened to the sport and what's happening to, all the people and all of us who love it. And those of us who are going to love it who don't play yet. So I thought I would read what I guess they call now the origin story that I got from Allison and Frank. We fanatics of the game all scour the internet, gobbling up anything and everything we can find out about how our passion came to be. Pickleball started small, a local game among friends, and a lot of you know this part, in 1965 on Bainbridge Island, Washington, in an attempt to keep their kids occupied. Some dads on vacation called together a game in a backyard with a salvaged net, a plastic ball, and some beat up ping pong paddles. What began as a diversion to while away an afternoon became the neighborhood's obsession. Other families joined in, the adults became more and more interested, and soon playing pickleball was a daily activity. These summer folks brought the new sport back to Seattle and its environs when they went back after the summer, where many of them lived, and occasionally one of their summer guests would even return to their own city or town with tales of this crazy game their friends had invented. In this way, pickleball became somewhat of an underground pastime, gaining popularity in Washington State, where it's now the only as of last year official state sport. It took a decade for pickleball's origin story to get picked up by a human interest piece, by some national press, and then another 10 years passed before it had enough of a foothold that players became interested in having better equipment, and a national association was founded. People really began to hear about pickleball in the early 2000s, mostly from friends playing it in retirement communities, or on winter vacations in the Sunshine States, or even from their kids who often played it in gym class indoors in the winter months. But in recent years, its growth has been exponential, and the sport that people thought was for their grandparents now has a median playing age of 38 and falling, by the way. So it's not for your grandparents anymore. Everywhere you look, there are families playing, kids playing, or people searching for courts to play on, repurposing spaces wherever they can find them. You've read stuff about old malls and parking lots and stuff like that, Bath and Beyond, whatever's happening, whatever we can get. It's not often you can reach back to the beginning when you're researching history to check with the source or ask a question you yearn to know the answer to. Lucky for us, pickleball is a relatively new game, and while the original 3 men who got this unique pastime started, Joel Pritchard, Bill Bell, and Barney McCallum, are no longer with us. Their children are. And the memories of how these families devised a game for them all to play is still very fresh in the minds of those kids who were there that summer. Now, I thought when I talked to Allison and then I talked to Frank, I thought, he's gonna have like a completely different story. And it was funny, the details, the whole story and the details too, were almost exact. And I thought they would say, she was 7, he was 13. I sort of remember, but there was other stuff going on that summer. Allison said, I remember the entire day from beginning to end. Fascinating. As legend has it, Frank Pritchard, here's a little picture. This is a colorized, old black and white Polaroid of him. As legend has it, Frank Pritchard was a bored kid who voiced that universal childhood complaint. There's nothing to do around here. I was lucky enough to track Frank down, and he freely admitted to be the now famous bored kid. Ladies and gentlemen, a standing ovation, please. You don't have to. To Frank Pritchard, show him your eternal thanks. Without him, there would be no pickleball. Frank laid down the gauntlet when I spoke to him at his home in Washington State. He laughed and said, this is how religious wars begin. Everybody has their own take in it, and they truly believe their side, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I probably had what I've heard referred to as a resting bitch face, he said. Or more accurately, the I hate this place, I hate my life, and I really hate your attempts to suggest things for me to do face. A typical well-rounded 13-year-old. My wife would tell you that I segued from whining to bitching because it's more adult. Frank sounded to me like he sort of was the man who would indeed tell the truth. He started by describing his family's summer getaway on Bainbridge, which was much more rustic back in the 60s than it is now. My grandparents had this sort of compound, and we had a goofy old house, he began. When I complained to my father that day, his retort was, well, when we were kids, we used to make games up. And then I said, oh, really? Well, you go make up a game for us. Frank's grandparents were big badminton players in their day and had a court on their property. He'd been given a wiffle ball, Frank, and a bat for a recent birthday, and it had lain around unused. And his father, Joel, picked it up, walked to the back of the property, and went to work. Allison Bell Wood, pickleball co-inventor Bill Bell's daughter, was about 7 years old that summer, but she clearly remembers the first day of playing. Oh yeah, she said, because the big kids didn't want the little kids to play. Eternal, right? She said, you know how at the beginning of something, it's so exciting. We all loved it, but the little kids were complaining because the big kids didn't want us to play. But I think it was Joel and my dad who helped navigate it from the beginning to figure out how everybody got a turn. Joel Pritchard and Bill Bell were great friends, and the Bells were renting a house that summer on Bainbridge. In fact, Frank and Allison and their families, all these years later, still visit, still good friends. And though it was the kids who instigated the game, Allison recalls, the adults took it over pretty quickly. Cocktails were always involved from the beginning of pickleball. My guess is a lot of gin and beer. Frank recalled that his dad and Bill started the process of getting the fun going, and Frank was kind of standing there taking it all in. And then his dad said, you know what we need? We need Barney. And off he went to grab pickleball co-inventor number 3. Barney McHugh and his family lived about 6 doors down, and Joel and Barney had worked together. Barney was a creative, clever guy, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to pick his brain, Joel thought. Barney immediately got on board, and he remained devoted to the sport until he died in 2019 at 93 years old. What about the rules, I wondered? Well, how did that thing get even loosely actually organized? Well, some things had to be addressed right away, Allison said. We were just hitting the ball back and forth, and then the parents said, hey, wait, this is a lot of fun. And they even started playing with the kids, which was a rare thing to play with your kids in those days. But almost instantly, since Joel and Dad were huge control freaks, they started making up the rules. Okay, here's the best one, I think. There was a family nearby called the Browns, and there was a dad and the 2 kids, the Brown brothers. They were about 16. All 3 of them were 6'3" or 6'4". So they came over, and they were what? Of course, like volleyball. They were standing right at the net, boom, 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 hitting it right over, and the kids were, they couldn't get it. So Joel and Bill said, they did, little toe in the sand, right? 3 feet back. They said, you got to stand here to hit the ball. You can't stand right at the net. They're like still 6'4". They're like, okay, try that. Boom, boom, boom. It's, redraw the line. 5 feet back, 7 feet back, until finally it seemed like, this would be far enough for anybody to not kill the person immediately on the other side. So that's how the kitchen was started. And I guess Aunt Joan Pritchard said, can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. Frank and Allison agreed a lot of pickleball's rules developed much later, when it became more widespread and accepted as a sport. Frank recalled the original rules were that it was scored like badminton. You serve cross court and 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You had to serve underhand to score, you had to be serving. But what about the net and the paddles? We had a building on the property, and my dad went up there and he found a badminton net. He fixed the net to his waist height, and then they kind of started screwing around how high it should be. Allison remembered the adults stripping the rubber off some of the ping pong paddles, but Barney got going with constructing the equipment right away. Frank said, we had some crude paddles and Barney cut the first real paddle out of plywood, and that design kind of stayed with us for years, for about 20 years, in fact. It was an interesting story. A guy who worked for Boeing in the mid-'80s, they were still making paddles out of wood. And this guy was seen lying around on the floor at the Boeing plant, this honeycomb plastic. And that they would use it, to keep the plane light, which we still don't know how they stay in there, but still. For, the seats and the bathroom doors and the floors. And he thought, this might work. And so the honeycomb interior is still used today. And that's how that started, which I think is fascinating. Then all the parents, kids alike, played pickleball constantly over the next several years on the island. The original court's still there and occasionally used, although the property is now owned by another family. But in the years right after 1965, each of the founders did his own version of serving as an ambassador of the sport. Joel Pritchard went into politics and became a member of Congress and eventually Washington's lieutenant governor. When he was on the road making political appearances, he'd take a net and some paddles and balls along with him, just like we do. The minute the crowd began to get restless, Pritchard would shout, let's play some pickleball. And this helped pickleball become well-known throughout the state, possibly helped him get some votes. Businessman Bill Bell gets the credit for taking pickleball global. After leaving Seattle, he and his family moved to New York City, where they take down a court at a club in Brooklyn. And then they lived in Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Indonesia. And they took pickleball with them wherever they went. Allison said to me, if it sounds like he was a spy, he was. We would have pickleball parties and tournaments there all the time in Jakarta with all the other expats in the 70s. But both Allison and Frank agreed the lifelong pickleball ambassador was Barney McHugh. Barney would be looked at by many to be the father of pickleball, because once the summers were over, Joel would go back to Congress in DC and we moved away. And then David, Barney's son, took over the growing Pickleball Inc. business that Barney started in 1972. Frank agreed wholeheartedly. Barney really deserves the credit for nurturing pickleball and feeding it and bringing it along. It wouldn't be what it is today if he hadn't stuck with it. He was the guy that did the hard work. And he really was. I mean, still at 93, he would go to, a new pickleball court opening, call you on the phone, whatever. I asked them what their families had taken away from this weird and magical ride and what they see when they look at pickleball then and now. Allison thought about it a moment before she answered. People just thought it was a crazy game, but it was a connector. I find that the whole thing with what's happening with pickleball just amazing, because it was nothing more than a fluke that it even got started that day. What's really been impressive to me is that the passion of a whole group of people who got nothing to do with Bainbridge or the Pacific Northwest has taken it to a completely different dynamic, she concluded. It's wonderful, and it just shows you the fun of the game. We remember our family experiences with it. That's really what it was about for us. When I told her the title of the book, Pickleball Is Life, Allison laughed. Pickleball is life, she agreed. And it reminds you that you can always learn to do new things and have fun. It is one thing I've learned is that it's a game that spans generations and spans interests. It's just accessible. You can play the game almost instantly. You get out there after 15 minutes, figure out the rhythm of the ball. It's always fun. It's easy to go out and play a quick game. You can't do that with tennis or golf or squash, but you can with pickleball. Frank is equally dumbfounded. My family is just amazed. I mean, it just isn't real. It isn't real. I asked him how this unexpected legacy made him feel. More than anything, Frank mused, my father would be so thrilled. He was the kind of like a camp counselor kind of guy, and he loved getting people up and moving and playing games. It just gave him a thrill. I think if he knew how many people got such pleasure out of this thing, besides exercise and mental health and physical health, I think that would be to him the greatest thing of all. And finally, readers, I'm going to address the topic that you've all been wondering about. What is the genesis of the name pickleball? How did this nutty name come to this insane game? Was it in fact named after a dog, as popular legend has it? Here's the spoiler alert. Allison was adamant in her reply. The dog came after the game, it was the boat. And Frank ought to know, because Pickles, the cockapoo, pictured here, was his dog. Pickles came to us in 1968, 3 years later. She was cute, sweet, and smart and all, he says, but she never went up to the court, never chased the ball. Well, how did this canine myth stick all these decades later? The dog, obviously, was named after the game. It got to be part of the story of the game's history, said Frank. And in 1975, a guy from the National Observer came to the island to do what was to be the first big media feature on the game. During the interview, someone told him the story people were saying, that the game was named for our dog Pickles, although that wasn't the case. And he said, oh no, the dog story is cute. Let's stick with that. Fake news, people. That's how the story was printed, and the name of the game actually came from Joan Pritchard, Frank's mother. She said the ragtag nature of the game reminded her of the rowing term, if you've ever heard it, pickleboat, which refers to a crew team that's been thrown together from random available rowers. Joan and Joel met at Marietta College, which had a popular crew team, and when they moved to Seattle, with University of Washington, has always had a renowned rowing program, as you know, if you've read Boys in the Boat. So, though the term pickleball may not enjoy wide usage, it was part of the Pritchard's vocabulary and a funny, fitting name for this scrubby game. I think the pickleball is so indicative of the game, an amalgamation of a lot of things and racket sports put together to create this quirky game, said Frank. And then he paused and said, my mother never got credit for naming this thing. It's been one of my little missions in life to get this story straight. So here's to you, Joan Pritchard. The record is being set straight at last. Think with coming up for the most stellar name for the world's most obsessive game. Okay. So, it's crazy. I mean, I think, people say to me, well, why do you say pickleball is life? I said, well, pickleball is life for me because I'm a nut. But maybe pickleball isn't life for you. It's possibly just something you do now and again. Not always. But I started to think about it, and I started to think, actually, why isn't life more like pickleball? It is accessible. It's cheap. It's inclusive. The social network is crazy great. You can always get better at it. I think, why isn't life more like that, right? And a lot of people ask me when I speak about the book to address the mental health and wellness of the sport. Even though most of it maybe we don't care, we're just having fun. But you'll notice sometimes if you've got kids in their 40s, 30s, and 40s, they'll be saying to you, well, what happened to your bridge game that you used to have? I noticed you don't do it anymore. And you'll say, well, Cindy moved away and she was sort of the linchpin. Well, you used to go to the movies a lot. Yeah, well, not since COVID. And they are looking for ways for you, people our age, to go out and find a new activity. So for those of us who play a lot, whether you want to or not, you're going to make 85 new friends. And I played the other day, I played with 3 different towns in one day. So I must have played with like 22 people, And, and you make friends and you make a connection and then you sit out between games and then you meet for drinks and here's the thing. I don't care who you are. When you get to be my age, you have to be careful for your life not to get smaller. And it can do it without you hardly noticing for a minute what is going on, right? It's just like, you're not gonna, you stop doing this, you stop doing that, and next thing you know, you're at home when you could be out. So, I'm gonna tell you something. Last fall, a friend of mine told me, she's 37, that she signed up to play in the New York City Pickleball Open, and it's at the Village Inn King Center, where the US Tennis Open is. And she said, oh God, we got slammed. But I couldn't stop thinking about it because I lived in New York for 42 years. Of course, we would just take the number 7 train out and go to the Open all the time. And I couldn't stop thinking of it. So thinking about it. So last winter, I thought, I could do it. I could stand one terrible, terrible day of embarrassment and slink back to South Africa, Massachusetts for the experience of play, and that's not sent to court, but the experience of playing in that place. And so I did, I signed up. And then you have to start looking online for a partner if you don't have one. And I found somebody, and she said, I don't see anything about you on your page, your profile page. I said, well, I've never played your tournament. So she's like, I'm here for a couple of years. She's like, all right, it sounds fun. She's from Hawaii. Now I got months to worry about, disappointing the lady from Hawaii. So we all got together, and she and her friend, and she's 69, I'm 70. She had a friend who was 55, who's like a 4.5 player, very good. And they took me for 4 hours, and I gotta tell you, they tore my game apart. An hour cross-court digs up, the hour 3rd-shot drops, and I was so nervous until the next day. I was not nervous. And I gotta tell you what happened. I can't remember the gold medal. And any of you who think you might want to do it, sign up next year. It is, it's not the Vatican, but being in that space was much more affecting than I thought it would be. And just like pickleball, which is so friendly, as we know, people from like way over there, they'd see you walking along with your medal, like, hey, congratulations, is that gold? What you playing in? And it was like cried all day. I'm still crying. So because I won a medal, I get to go to nationals. What about that? So, my first tournament at 70, and now I'm going to the nationals. Come on, people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, questions? Anybody have questions?
Oh, I have a pop quiz. How about that?
Question.
Oh, I have a question. Now, if you've already read the book, you can't answer all the pop quiz questions. Okay. Is there a shot clock like in pro tennis or basketball?
No.
Yeah.
Who said this? And tell me the story.
10 seconds after you.
You are correct, sir. So if there's wind or people are in your way or something, sorry, or people are disturbing you, you can wait as long as you want, but the minute you say the score, you've got 10 seconds to serve. If you suspect, you can't answer anymore. If you suspect the ball is cracked, can you stop playing the point? If you suspect that the ball is cracked, can you stop playing the point?
Yes. No.
Yes, no. Either way, you gotta come up with a better answer than yes, no.
It's like, what's the thing wanted?
But you want, but what you have to do if no. No. You must play through the point. Then everybody gets together to inspect the possibly injured ball. And if it's damaged, all must agree, and only 2 will, whether or not it played a part in the outcome of the previous point. If yes, you play the point over, with a new ball, duh. Okay, if I'm standing behind the baseline and I'm hit with the ball, I don't still lose the point, do I?
Yeah.
Somebody tell me more, please?
The ball takes one around, the other one's only done it for.
Even if you're standing outside the baseline,
Yeah.
until what? I said incomplete answer, you wouldn't get the money on Jeopardy.
You have the back baseline, that's the person.
If you're outside the baseline and you get hit with the ball,
You're out. It's out, the ball's out. Then you
it's, yes, but you still lose the point because the ball is not dead. You got in the way. That's why there's all that toreador sort of, yeah. Amazing. Imagine how much you're gonna learn when you buy 10 or 12 of the book. Okay, what happens if your shot, by dint of a high wind or a wicked slice or both, I guess, goes over the net and then comes back to your side without your opponent hitting it?
Oh, wonderful.
Check.
You're allowed to crack the ball.
I'm sorry?
You're allowed to crack the ball.
You're allowed to what?
Crack the ball. It was a bad joke. I'm so
Oh,
I thought it
sorry,
was.
service point.
No.
You're correct. It's your point, and stop playing before you screw it up. Don't hit it again.
You could reach over and hit it if you're.
Yes, you can do that too, but they don't know about that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, knowledgeable people, and pray for more knowledge when you read the book.
Does anybody have questions? Great.
One question for you. You mentioned in the book that, you
See, he has already read the book. Okay,
73 countries need to be, playing to get in the Olympics. Where are we?
I think we're close, but it's more complicated than that. I thought it was 75, 73, 75 was the diff. It's sort of odd for men. And I think it's like 60 or 65 for women. So it has to be played, it has to be fairly popular throughout the country. It can't be like it's only played in Paris, and then France is going to play in. So it has to fit both of those parameters. And is fairly close. Although I will tell you, when the book got published, then you start to think, you or your agents start to think about foreign sales. Usually your publisher owns English rights, so they can publish it in Australia and England, blah, 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 blah. And we start to look around, and there aren't so many countries. And I have a Pickleball Is Life book Instagram page, and I have followers from Brazil and Iran and India and other places, but it's not as popular, though it's getting there, as it is here. So it could be that we thought it's not gonna work out to sell it to other places, but
Bye.
but anyway, it's a lot of, so we hope for, what is it now, 2023, we hope by maybe 2028 it might be an Olympic sport, but that would be, that in that world is rushing it, so we'll see. Jay.
So you're a wildly published author. Very successful. How does the experience of this book, which is at a moment in time when this is so huge, how is your experience with this book different than the other works?
How was what? I'm sorry.
The experience with this book, publishing this, different from your other.
I made a lot more money, and I sold it overnight, as I said, which was, that's unheard of. That makes you feel like you're famous, practically. Of course, once you pay, by the way, your taxes and your 15% to your agent, and I had to pay $7,500 to the illustrator, bing, bang, boom, But it has been a constant joy. It is something, you always sort of write about what you love, you try, but also if somebody calls me and says, I'll pay you 10 cents to write this book, I would do it, because, they say writer writes, but, you always want to feel relevant, especially as you get older, right? But this has been so fun. And so many people feel like I do, you guys, so many of you guys feel like I do. So, and it has had a longer tail than usual. As Pam will tell you, usually when a book is published, you have 3 months tops. to go out there and, sell the book, and then it gets relegated to, another place in the store. Your publicist moves on to the next list, things like that. But because we hurry to publish at a holiday, which is the biggest, the biggest part of the year, for almost 75% of book sales take place during that period from Thanksgiving to New Year. Father's Day is the second holiday though.
Which is coming up.
Right. So for me to have to be able to go places, I mean, I've got like a dozen places still that I'm going to in spring and summer is unusual. And of course, I'm relishing it because, of course they say, do what you love and it's not a job, but I mean, this is really fun, right? I mean, this is fun to talk about pickleball and go places and meet people who feel like you do. That's, that kind of interaction is what we all love, so I just happened to write the book about it. So it's been about as much fun as a girl can have.
Yeah. What kind of sports did you enjoy before pickleball?
Well, I played tennis constantly when I was in high school. And I always felt like sort of a mediocre athlete. And so that's one of the things about pickleball. Again, as I said, why I like more like pickleball. I really feel you can always get better at it. And and so and I sort of made it that thought, I've never been great at anything, really anything. I'm going to try to make myself real, and I'm not great. I mean, when I went to New York, I played at the highest age and lowest skill level. So what? Somebody finally stopped qualifying.
You got the gold medal.
But I got the gold medal. And I'm going to that. So what happened was I moved to New York. I was in publishing, which made in 1977, I made $7,500. So you maybe have $7 left at the end of the week. So then we used to we had a credit card, we had credit cards for stores. We had credit cards to Bjaltman and Lord and Taylor, and you would go there for lunch because you had no money. Then you get that $9 bill at the end of the month that you couldn't. So when I got to New York with the $7 I had at the end of the week, I thought, well, I could play indoor tennis or squash, which I also loved. If I got somebody else, a couple of other people to play with me, or I could go to the disco. And that was the next 42 years, going to the disco. So, I will say the one great thing about that is that I sat down for 42 years. So I'm painless at 70. So that'll change.
Another question? Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.